Red Eyes Creations members, thank you for listening and thank you for being here with us. We have Rens van der Sluijs with us on the line, and we are talking about plasma mythology, creation myths, and the Axis Mundi, and much, much more. And in this second segment, I would like to dive a little bit deeper into the idea of the myth surrounding the dragon or the Ouroboros. And of course, there are many accounts of dragons in mythology. And I'd like to begin here to ask you, Rens, what you think is the origin of this very widespread myth that we can pick up from all around the world, basically.
Okay, I'd say the short answer is perhaps there isn't just one origin. But basically, the impression I have is that if you look at the oldest texts we have and the earliest traditions, where dragons are abundant, the impression you get is that these are phenomena in the sky. These are luminous objects that were once observed in the heavens. And yeah, I'd say the short answer is that these are plasma phenomena that were once visible to the human eye.
And
this is, of course, a completely different interpretation than what you'll find in most museums or most books about dragons, where they will usually tell you that the idea of a dragon came from ancient people observing dinosaur bones.
Sure, yeah.
So we're told that in China, for instance, countryside has observed dinosaur fossils, and on the basis of that, just imagine that there had been these gigantic creatures who basically acted like dragons. I wouldn't really be inclined to believe that that's the whole truth. There's no doubt that in many societies, fossils are interpreted as dragons, but I don't think we have the origins of the dragon motif for that. Because it's really quite simple. In mythology, dragons play a completely different role. It doesn't really quite fit what people would see with fossils.
So
I probably, if you look at fossils, it would require just too much imagination to see in those animals that behave exactly like dragons in world myth.
Right.
Dragons, for instance, have a very intimate connection with creation, with the making of the world.
Yeah.
They are often described to be of a gigantic cosmic size. They are prodigious creatures. They are dangerous creatures. These are things that you can't really easily explain just as extrapolations from observations of fossils.
And I guess that there are kind of a few hints, so to speak, in the symbol of the dragon itself that kind of gives it away, so to speak. I mean, we have the wings, of course, of the dragon, meaning that this is a creature that can fly or be in the sky. And then we have the idea of that the dragon is breathing fire, or fire is coming out of its mouth, and this would, I guess, dovetail perfectly with your ideas and theories, right?
Especially if you take all those features together as a whole, of course, because zoologists will often be inclined to look for one particular species that might just fit a particular mythical trait. So let's say dragons are seen to fly through the sky in ancient traditions. Zoologists or paleontologists might tell you, okay, that's pterodactyls, because they did fly. Or dragons being so vast as to span the entire Earth, okay, that's just because dinosaurs were huge animals. So there's a lot of ad hocery, I think, in the literature where people are trying to force-fit dragon mythology into fossils and what we know about those species.
Right.
I would definitely agree that plasma phenomena, electromagnetic phenomena in the sky, form by far the most convincing explanation of what we're told about dragons. There are so many of these attributes, and a lot of it is actually pioneering knowledge again, because there's so much about dragon mythology that hasn't really been explored to satisfaction. And one example is the ubiquitous pearl of the dragon.
Yeah, tell us about that.
It's such a widespread motif. There's always this radiant red orb that is carried in front of a dragon, as in the Chinese New Year's festival, for instance. Or that's carried on top of the dragon's head, or believed to dwell inside its body. It's really a motif you find worldwide. And what is this pearl? If you ask traditional societies, the answer you'll usually receive is it's the sun or the moon, or it's the heart of the dragon, or just a pearl.
Mm-hmm.
At any rate, it's not something you see with the fossils.
Right.
So this pearl, this radiant object in the embrace of the dragon, is something that also needs to be explained along with the dragon itself. It just belongs in the myth. Another example of that is the connection of the dragon with the world axis, with the cosmic tree. If you put the dragon back into its original context, you'll usually see that it's positioned below the tree of life, or in the underworld at the root of the cosmic mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's wrapped around the cosmic pillar, or it becomes the rope of heaven, and so on and so on. It frequently has this intimate association with the central pillar that was believed to join the earth with the sky. And obviously, again, this is far removed from what you could infer from dinosaur fossils.
Yeah.
But it could potentially make a lot more sense if you look at the electromagnetic environment of the earth.
Interesting. And this particular image also, this is something that has kind of been anthropomorphized by human beings, way back then, that we put a face on on the dragon, so to speak. And what is interesting, of course, is that there is some kind of similarity, of course, with the dinosaur idea, but again, that's not the whole story. For instance, we can maybe talk a little bit about Quetzalcoatl, the feather serpent, and we can return again to the Mayan mythology. What's your take on Quetzalcoatl?
Quetzalcoatl, if you just begin with the source analysis, Mayanists or scholars of Mesoamerica would agree that Quetzalcoatl is essentially the morning star, possibly the planet Venus.
Mm-hmm.
So it's essentially an astral phenomenon that's being described. It's something in the sky, it's something radiant, and it's something with a close association with creation mythology. And that's probably all we could agree on at present with specialists in the area. I would argue that we are looking at a Mesoamerican variation of a worldwide theme. And the worldwide theme is that the morning star, one of the planets, once sported a visible tail. So there was this event in the wake of creation upon which this dragon ascended onto the sky and turned into the morning star. You see this essentially the same motif in the ancient Egyptian texts about Osiris, who also rises to heaven after a temporary death in the form of the morning star. There are parallels in several cultures. So I think we're looking at an unusual appearance of an object in the sky, perhaps the planet Venus really, perhaps some other body, maybe a cometary body, that inspired these stories. So I think there's a reality value to these myths, but not to the extent that Quetzalcoatl was a historical king whose biography then turned into the dragon story.
Right.
There seems to be sufficient evidence that there was actually a king called Quetzalcoatl, I believe in the 6th century AD. But chances are that this king was just named after the mythical deity, just like kings worldwide are known to have been.
And
if you look at the ancient Near East, virtually every king's name carries a name of one of the gods, so it's just the most common thing in the world.
I see what
this
you mean.
Historical ruler, of whom we know very little, I think doesn't have the potential to explain anything of Quetzalcoatl's myth. If only because other peoples in Central America had similar stories, but they called the feathered serpent Cuculcan among the Mayas, or different names.
Yeah. So, what would cause an event like this? For instance, let's say that what was seen here was Venus. What kind of event do you think would have caused this to appear like this in the sky with a big tail? I know that there are theories out there that suggest that Venus actually was, how should I put it? Trajected out from another planet, or that it was something another planet from without our solar system that actually was coming in. Have you been able to pin this down in any way, or do you have any theories about this?
Well, I certainly wouldn't believe any planets from outside the solar system entered ours, but perhaps comets did, or at any rate, it's a question I would like to ask to plasma physicists, because as a humanities scholar, I don't believe I have the expertise to answer the question. But I think the question really should be, is it possible that at a time when there was more intense electromagnetic activity in the solar system, that the planet Venus or any of the other planetary bodies sported a visible tail? It's not a new idea, but I think it's more reasonable than ever before to ask the question. And that is because only in recent years it has been confirmed scientifically that the planet Venus has an enormous magnetic tail, the magnetosphere.
Mm-hmm.
It should be, I think it should be pointed out that the planet Venus itself has a really weak magnetic field, but it does have a long magnetotail, which receives its charge from outside the planet. Now, from where would that be? From the solar wind. Because the solar wind basically feeds into the electromagnetic fields of both the Earth and Venus. They're both in the inner part of the solar system.
Mm-hmm.
So we have basically scientifically, on an empirical basis, we have seen that the planet Venus has this gigantic tail that touches the Earth almost, if the planets would be lined up with respect to the Sun.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all that would be needed would be to have an increased solar wind again. So my gut feeling is, and perhaps more than a gut feeling, is that the same mechanism that could explain creation mythology as a whole could also explain why the morning star is described as having a tail in ancient traditions.
Yeah.
An increased solar wind, lots of electromagnetic activity in the inner solar system, and as a result, the magnetic tail of Venus is excited to such an extent that it becomes visible. So it glows. And there you go. There's a dragon in the morning sky, and its tail swipes the Earth at times when the planet lines up with the Earth. And people on the planet become incredibly frightened of the approach of Venus. It all makes so much sense. So I think that would be a good hypothesis.
Fascinating.
Good hypothesis.
Definitely.
But again, we would need stronger scientific evidence that this can happen.
I guess the best scientific evidence would be if this were to happen again, right?
Yeah, that'd be great. Especially if any of us could survive and tell the story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's another
who knows,
thing.
Perhaps on a smaller scale, perhaps even on a laboratory, in a laboratory environment, you could demonstrate something to this effect with charged bodies representing planets.
Interesting.
Why not?
Why not? Yeah.
In the same way that the existence of the auroras and the mechanism behind the auroras was originally verified experimentally by Christian Birkeland again, who had his little terrellas, his miniature Earths, on which he produced auroral ovals, the auroral rings. So I think perhaps the best step to proceed would be to model these things in a laboratory and just test, see if we can make such a tail appear.
And I mean, size, doesn't that matter in regards to how accurately we could reproduce this, so to speak?
Plasma is definitely scalable. It's known to be scalable on many degrees of magnitude. So essentially the same physical laws would apply on a really small scale and on the largest possible scales on the level of galaxies. Really?
Wow.
So I'm sure there will be parameters and restrictions, but in general, plasma laws are scalable to a high extent. So there's no principal objection.
I guess that there is a lot of energy involved in an experiment like this, but do you know if there are any laboratories today that are involved in this kind of or similar research?